Imagine you are just 20 years old. Your father, King Philip II, has just been murdered, stabbed at a banquet, on a day when the whole city was celebrating. Macedonia is surrounded by enemies. Your own army doubts whether you are worthy to be king. Your generals look at you and see a boy. Neighboring states are already rubbing their hands together, seeing your country as easy prey. But within just a few years, your name will be known from Greece to India. You will march with your army for thousands of kilometers, winning battles against forces many times greater than your own. You will become the greatest military commander in the history of humanity, and some will believe you are the son of Zeus himself. And yet, at the age of 32, you will leave this life, leaving behind an empire that no one before you had ever created, and no one after you could ever hold together. This is the story of Alexander the Great. He was born in 356 BC in Pella, the capital of Macedonia, a small but fierce kingdom in the north of the Greek peninsula, a land that the southern Greeks, the Athenians, the Corinthians, did not consider truly Hellenic. Yet it was from this very land that a man emerged who would conquer the entire known world. His father, Philip II, was one of the most gifted military minds of his century. He created the famous Macedonian phalanx, a dense infantry formation armed with sarissa spears that reached 6 meters in length. Such a spear did not merely kill, it covered an entire sector of space, making the phalanx an impenetrable wall of iron and wood. His mother, Olympias, was an unusual woman, passionate, mystical, at times frightening. But she gave her son something no teacher ever could, an unshakable belief in his own extraordinary destiny. From his earliest years, she told him, "You are not merely a king's son. You are a descendant of Achilles. You are chosen." And he believed her. One day, a wild horse named Bucephalus was brought to the palace. Enormous, black, uncontrollable. Every experienced rider had failed, but Alexander noticed what the others had not. The horse was afraid of its own shadow. He turned the animal to face the sun. The shadow disappeared behind it. The horse grew calm. Alexander leapt into the saddle and rode. Philip watched with tears in his eyes and said, "My son, seek a kingdom worthy of yourself. Macedonia is too small for you." At 13, his teacher became Aristotle, the greatest mind of his age. For 3 years, Alexander studied philosophy, medicine, geography, and rhetoric. But the greatest gift was a book. Aristotle personally copied the Iliad of Homer for him. Alexander carried this copy with him his entire life, kept beside a dagger beneath his pillow. Achilles became his ideal, not because Achilles was invincible, but because Achilles made a choice. He chose eternal glory over a long but forgotten life. Alexander made the same choice, deliberately. At 20, when an assassin's blade ended his father's life at a banquet, he did not hesitate. While others waited and wavered, he acted. Cities rose in revolt. Thebes, Athens, all of them decided the young king was weak. Alexander swept through Greece like a storm. Thebes was erased from the earth. The rest understood. This was no boy standing before them. This was a king. In 334 BC, he crossed the Hellespont and entered Asia. He had around 37,000 soldiers. Before him stood the Persian Empire, a civilization of 50 million people. At the river Granicus, he attacked immediately, personally leading the cavalry charge. An enemy spear shattered against his helmet. One moment more and history would have ended right there. But he survived, and he won. At Issus, Darius III brought an army 5 times the size of the Macedonian force. Alexander drove straight toward where the Persian king stood. Darius fled, abandoning his mother, his wife, and his children in the camp. Alexander treated them with complete respect, as befitted a king. He took Tyre, an island fortress considered unconquerable, in 7 months of siege, building a causeway of stone and timber straight out into the sea. He entered Egypt, and the priests welcomed him as a liberator. In the Nile Delta, he founded a city and named it after himself. Alexandria. That city still stands today. At Gaugamela, Darius assembled his last great army. The Persians numbered more than 200,000. Alexander found the moment of weakness, drove his cavalry like a wedge into the center, and won again. The Persian Empire fell, But he did not stop. He marched further, through the mountains of Afghanistan, through deserts, through lands where no Greek soldier had ever set foot. In India, he defeated King Porus and his war elephants, creatures his men had never seen before in their lives. But here the army said, enough. 8 years of marching, thousands of kilometers from home. The soldiers were exhausted. They wanted to go home. For the first time in his life, Alexander retreated, not before an enemy, but before the weariness of his own men. It was harder than any defeat. He returned to Babylon. He made new plans. A campaign into Arabia, an expedition around Africa, the unification of peoples. He did not want merely to conquer the world. He wanted to change it. Along the way, he lost the most precious thing he had. Hephaestion, his closest friend since childhood, died suddenly of fever. Alexander did not leave his tent for 3 days. He did not eat. He did not drink. His grief was boundless. And then it was Alexander's own turn. In June of 323 BC, the gods took him. A sudden, merciless illness. 10 days of fever. When his generals came to say farewell and asked to whom he was leaving his kingdom, he answered with a single word, to the strongest. He was 32 years old. He had marched more than 30,000 kilometers. He had founded more than 70 cities. He had never lost a single battle. His body died in Babylon. But Alexander, never. Centuries later, Julius Caesar stood before a statue of Alexander and wept. When asked why, he answered, "At his age, I had done nothing." Napoleon slept with a book about Alexander beneath his pillow. Indian kings 3 centuries after his death called themselves his descendants to legitimize their power. Alexander did not simply conquer the world. He became a myth while still alive. And that myth proved stronger than any wall, any army, any empire. This is what it means to burn brightly. This is what it means to choose legend over life. I am Alexander, and I was here. Yet the story does not end with his death. The empire he built did not survive him. His general on the Diadochi, the successors, turned on each other the moment he was gone. They fought for decades, carving his world into pieces. None of them could hold what Alexander had created alone. Because what Alexander had created was not just territory, it was an idea. The idea that the world does not have to be divided, that a Greek and a Persian, a Macedonian and an Egyptian, could stand in the same city, speak the same language, read the same books, and build something together. He called it no grand name. He simply lived it, wearing Persian robes, marrying a Bactrian princess, bowing to the gods of every land he entered. The Greeks called this era the Hellenistic Age. For 300 years after Alexander, the Greek language spread from the shores of the Mediterranean to the borders of India. It became the language of science, of philosophy, of trade. The New Testament was written in it. The mathematics of Euclid, composed in Alexandria, was taught in European universities until the 19th century. Eratosthenes, working in Alexander's city, calculated the circumference of the earth with startling accuracy, 18 centuries before Columbus set sail. One man, 32 years, and the entire shape of the ancient world changed forever. He was not perfect. He drank too much. He killed a friend in rage and wept for days afterward. He demanded to be worshipped as a god while still mortal. He drove his army through a desert that nearly destroyed them. But when has greatness ever been without shadow? What remains is this. He looked at the horizon and refused to accept that it was the end. Every time the world said, "This is as far as you go," he found another way forward until the very last day. And perhaps that is the only question that truly matters. Not how long you lived, not how safely you walked through this world, but whether you burned, whether you truly, fully burned while you were here. Alexander burned brighter than anyone before him, brighter than